Welcome to Embracing New Life, where we explore the world of mental health, offer hope, and spark important conversations as we explore the intersections of mental health resources and Christianity and those who stand in the gap. Today, we're launching an exciting new series called Mental Health in the News. Every day, headlines about mental health make their way into the news, some encouraging, others challenging, but all of them matter. In this series, we'll be reviewing and responding to these headlines, diving into what they mean for you, your loved ones, and society at large. We've set up a daily Google alert to bring us the latest stories, and today we'll be discussing some of the most important and thought-provoking topics making waves in the mental health space. So whether you're on a walk, in your car, or relaxing at home, thank you for joining us. Let's jump into today's headlines. Okay, so this is going to be the first episode of a series of episodes that we're going to title Mental Health in the News. Basically, I have a Google alert set to send me every day any articles based around a number of different topics concerning mental health in the news, as at least Google finds it. And so I'm going to read the title of each of the articles that it's sent me, and even potentially a little bit of a blurb when it's appropriate. And we'll dive into what our thoughts are on that particular article, if we have any. And if we don't, we can move on to the next article.
Right, let's go.
All right, so breaking the mental health stigma, a spicy conversation. Well, not much there. It talks about just breaking down the stigma of mental health and suicide, like talks through suicide and extreme mental health cases and needing to break down that stigma.
You know, I think a feature that's really important to consider is this dichotomous thinking of mentally ill and being perfect. And that all of us have challenges in coping.
Yeah.
The stigma, I believe, is fueled by this sense of that's them, not me. Or if I am struggling with something, I will be devalued if others know I have the struggle.
Yeah.
But a realistic picture of the human is all of us have the struggle.
Yes.
Our struggles are different in many ways.
Yep.
But as my aunt used to say, nobody gets the whole enchilada.
Most definitely.
And I think it's really helpful for us to break the stigma down by recognizing the fall has consequences for all of us. And so what the challenge takes different forms, but none of us are exempt from the consequences of the fall.
No, most definitely. And then, I mean, that's even from a non-Christian source, you know, that talking about breaking down the stigma that exists just in culture in general.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's even so much more important in the Christian community to break down the stigma that exists, or that has a tendency to spiritualize mental health issues, and, you know, relate it to something spiritual going on. You know, it's really important to recognize, no, this is just a consequence of the world that we live in because of sin and its impact.
Yes.
The next article says, is mental health funny? So this was kind of an interesting one. They talk about mental health discussions, even the toughest of them, can be about optimism, change, and recovery. We don't have to go the warrior route. And so this idea that they get at is the thought of when you're having mental health discussions or in counseling, it doesn't have to be all drudgery and let's just dig up stuff and it's going to be hard and difficult all the time.
So you and I talk a lot about how do we cope given the fall and world we're in. And evidenced in exploring that will be our resiliencies, the patterns we have that facilitate health, wellness, goodness, acting in love. When we're exploring our mental health challenges, we're looking for those resources and strengths and capacities that we have. Again, and it might sound like the old broken record, but when we accept the reality of the fall, the reality of the consequences, then we're free to identify all the good that exists inside that.
Yeah.
What I see of people that don't accept the reality of our needs and the reality of the fall, they deny the problems. They also deny the strengths of coping with the problem.
Yeah. Yep. And in a previous podcast, we talked about the way that God has designed us. And part of the way he's designed us is to have fun and have humor and
Yes.
enjoy, how he has, creation in general, so
Yes.
it's an important element.
In fact, we know in Philippians 4, it's God's desire that we do look at things which are good and pure and praiseworthy
Yeah.
and beautiful, that he desires that for us amongst all the challenges we have.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I don't know the exact research, but I know that I've seen that, research has indicated the necessity on the part of humans in general just to lean into good things, humor, laughing, just because of its, physiological benefit that it has on us.
Well, we also have good evidence supporting gratitude.
Oh, yeah.
Giving
Yeah.
thanks is really healthy for us.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. The next article is what psychiatrists get wrong about mental health. Many mental health conditions have bodily triggers. We explore why the greater focus on biology could improve psychiatry.
And as we've been talking in our podcast, we are not separate entities. We are a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And our person occurs in a body. Our body is where thoughts and feelings and relationships.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as we understand our body better, that is helping us understand ourselves better.
Yeah.
All our choices happen in a body.
Yes.
So this is mysterious in so many ways, but as we're gaining understanding of how our body works, I think it is facilitating us coping more effectively.
Most definitely. And not only do all of our choices happen in a body, but the consequences of those choices occur within that body as well.
Right. Very true.
And it's connected to our mind, it's a holistic system that needs to be looked at holistically.
Old Greek philosophy, body bad, the mind good. That is not reality. That's not how human beings are.
And really that's what Paul's fighting there in the first century, the Gnosticism of, everything physical is bad and it's only really the spiritual that we need to look at. And the fight against, no. Like, yes, things are not the way that they were designed to be, but the new creation has begun. God is making all things new. And they're not that way yet, but he is making all things new. But we need to not discount the physical creation because we are holistic beings.
Another feature, I was talking to someone about this just this morning, the life events, traumatic events, horrible events, they impact and they change our body.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's intriguing in the resurrection stories, Jesus restored to life in his body, and it still had the holes in his hands, his feet, and his side, which is pretty freaky to think about.
Yeah.
But the restored body of the resurrected Christ still showed the bodily consequences of the wrong that's done to it.
Yeah.
Yes, of course he lived well after that. But living well doesn't mean the consequences are as if they never occurred.
Yeah.
But rather we live well with the consequences.
Yeah. I'm even reminded of, it's still early on. The research is still very young. But how the impact of trauma can even impact humans at the point of their DNA, where DNA code can actually be altered based on the trauma that, generations before you experienced.
Yeah, what it's looking like is life experiences, particularly traumatic experiences, impact how genes are activated or inactive, which then impacts how the DNA code is expressed.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's relatively recent, but it's very profound.
Yeah. It's amazing. It just speaks to that point that we've talked about routinely, the idea that we are just holistic individuals who you have to look at everything because we're so interconnected.
Yes.
The next two articles, I'll put them together because they're kind of the same, or not the same, but they're similar enough. That the first article is mental health diagnoses take unprecedented leap, and then mental health diagnoses jump across seniors. So this idea that there's a rise in mental health reporting. And the second article, the little blurb, says why it matters. While the data reflects the anxiety and stress of the pandemic era, it could also point to reduce stigma in seeking care. So, do you think that it is the destigmatization of mental health that is leading to the increase in diagnoses, or do you think that there's something more going on that potentially harkens to why this is occurring?
So on this one, I'm going to choose option C, all of the above.
Yeah.
And, a factor there is I do believe that we're seeing a decrease in many of the structures and the institutions, from the family to the church, to the community, all the way to national. We're seeing chaos and decrease in those structures that have provided aid in coping and in finding comfort and finding wellness. The increase in loneliness that is being reported certainly is congruent with that. I'm glad to hear that more people are willing to reach out and to seek help for this.
Yeah.
And that, yes, that will right there result in more people seeking help.
Yeah.
The numbers are greater.
Yeah.
It's kind of self-evident. But I believe that more people are seeking help in light of more people are recognizing a deep need for help.
Most definitely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And as we talked in one of our early podcasts, that is why the church is perfectly positioned to really take on this ever developing trend of people needing mental health resources and or just support in general because of the role that the church can have in those kind of scenarios where
absolutely
the community, the body of Christ, that's what we're called to be. It's called to be something beyond just familial lines or ethnic lines. Like we're a body that is meant to support everybody.
And those deep needs to know and be known, to love and be loved. The healthy church offers the structure and the environment in which we're known and we know others. We act in services of love towards others. We experience the love of others. All of this in serving and knowing and loving God.
Yeah. It's cool. It's a very cool opportunity that the church has.
It's a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. The next article, I don't think this is anything surprising to most, but it says physical fitness linked to better mental health in young people. So just that correlation between the more we move our bodies, which we talked in an earlier podcast about how we're designed. So we're designed to move. We're designed to use our bodies. The more we do that, the better our mental health outcomes typically are.
And there's many, many reasons for this, and I'm just going to highlight just one. That sense of agency, that sense of being an actor in one's life. When we're physically active, we're initiating, we're choosing, we're doing things. The passive or just the responding position is not a healthy place for us to be in long term.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's a good reminder especially for Western Americans where we're pretty sedentary, that we just need to get up, go walk around the block, walk up and down the stairs. We need to use our bodies more.
I find it almost humorous that one of the most beneficial activities of a human being is walking, which is what we have to do to move at all. The most basic thing we need to do to function turns out to be one of the best things for us.
Yeah, it is funny. But it's a good reminder. We don't think about it enough, typically. The next article is how religion helped these believers improve their mental health. I won't dive into the article because to get into the meat of it, it gets long. But this idea, this correlation, right, between religion or spirituality and mental health outcomes. What does research teach us about that nowadays?
Rather than thinking of them as in competition with each other, which might have been the case 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's recognized, and has been now for quite some time, that faith journey of an individual and faith community that a person is part of both can contribute significantly to positive mental health. The meeting of the needs of knowing and being known, loving, being loved, can occur in that the purpose. Many people find purpose in their faith, and they find a sense of comfort that we all need. So most mental health clinicians today are wanting to work with a person's faith. Now, sometimes we could talk about their faith becomes toxic. Anything good can be perverted.
For sure.
Anything good can be misused.
Yeah, for sure.
But overall, we're recognizing that faith individually and faith communities are actually associated with more positive mental health.
Yeah, yeah. And from a Christian perspective, right, we would just say that is part of the way that God has designed it.
That's part of the design.
Yeah, we just need that to function well. Mm-hmm. Good. The next article would be Common Mental Health Problem Can Shorten Cancer Survivors' Life. Study finds. Cancer survivors who feel lonely tend to have a greater risk of dying, according to research from the American Cancer Society. Mm-hmm. So there, once again, we hit the nail on the head of the loneliness epidemic and how impactful it can be for individuals from a mental health standpoint.
Yeah, an area of research that I'm more familiar with is in the cardiac healthcare for the heart and forgiveness. That people that were isolated had far worse outcomes after open heart surgery, and people that recognized unforgiveness had far worse outcomes, even though just medically, physically, the cases were the same as those who did well. These type of variables are so intricately involved with how the whole person works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important, right? I mean, it really goes back to how we're designed, and what we need in order to thrive in this life. And I think it's just amazing too how when you really start to look at the research of loneliness, just how impactful when somebody feels isolated, cut off, lonely. Use whatever verbiage you want to. Just how profound an impact that can have, not only on their mental health, but on their physical health too.
Absolutely.
It's just incredible. Yes. Just incredible. And like we said in a previous podcast, everybody has different, needs when it comes to human relationships. And so some people don't need as much as other people do, but we all need it, like you said.
We all need it.
Yeah, we all need it. And to deny that does yourself no good.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, Americans perceive gaps in mental, physical health care. Health issues data are from blah, 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 blah. Oh, wait. Nope, that was the wrong one. I meant not to read that one, but...
Never mind.
Yeah, scratch that one. We could talk about it, but we'd have to get into what they were saying. The one I was going to read was, most Americans say mental health issues get worse treatment than physical ones. What would you have to say to that?
In my career, I've seen some development in this area, but in general, mental health has been relegated to the lower or maybe lowest level of health care.
Yeah.
That the amount of attention that it's given has been far less. The amount of resources that have been given in research, the amount of resources in compensation to the providers, et cetera, et cetera. It's just sort of the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
And I think that there's that comes out of that old dichotomous view of physical problems are real, mental health problems, well, there's something else.
Yeah.
And they just have not been understood and responded to as other areas of healthcare.
Yeah. Do you feel like our European counterparts is there a greater networks for mental health in Europe than in America, or is it about the same?
I don't think it's a whole lot different.
Okay.
The whole Western world has had this split.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're all kind of in the same spot, trying to make up ground quickly as we learn that this is a very important area.
Yeah. We're seeing some changes.
Yeah.
But it's a deep bias in us.
Yeah. And do you feel like the pandemic really helped to expose the need for that as well? Just both on the part of like insurance, being willing to support mental health, mental health resources, but also on the part of just people in general, and even the church, just the identification, like, oh wow, mental health is something that we really need to think about.
Well, we certainly have in the last couple of years, as pandemics resolved, seen much more attention to these issues.
Yeah,
and I think in part, during the pandemic, so much fell apart that it became obvious to us, things that we were able, with all our other activities pre-pandemic, to ignore.
Yeah. Yeah. So things are changing, which is a good a good thing to acknowledge. So two things. There's two articles that are very similar. One mentions a specific pastor in general. I won't mention his name, but basically goes on to say that this pastor says there's no such thing as a mental illness, and he's a pretty well-known pastor in the evangelical world. And then the other one is an article about a space for people to be cared about. And it goes into the dynamic that we've talked often about, the role that the church can have in the current culture and in supporting people with mental health issues.
Yeah. Yes, there was a pastor recently in the news saying this, but this has been said by many over the years, and it comes again from that Greek mentality of body, mind, or body, soul split. And so that everything, for some in their viewpoint, everything is a spiritual problem. And on the one hand, we could say, well, everything is impacted by the fall, which is a spiritual phenomenon, but everything is a physical problem, and everything is a psychological problem, and everything is a social problem.
Yeah.
Putting them into these silos and separating them is often a way to feel like I'm in control of it.
Yeah.
But it isn't realistic. It doesn't bring lasting results. So when someone is presenting something like that to me, one of the things that I would want to challenge them with is the wholeness of our creation, that even the incarnation of Christ, that in a body, that this is real, that it's not a competition between the church and mental health professionals. While one is going to focus more in one area, one's going to focus more in the other area, we work best when we overlap and we focus on the whole person.
For sure.
And that's what I believe the church can bring to our overall culture.
Yeah.
That so many in the culture do ignore the spiritual, even though they have some sense that it's real and important. I don't know what to do with it, so we ignore it. Well, we can bring into culture not only the wholeness of the person in all its other elements, but kind of feel completing the wholeness by bringing in the spiritual as well.
Yeah.
When we try to split them apart, we, I think, really are sending away so many people who want to know how do I live the way I'm designed to.
Yeah.
And splitting apart is not the answer. That doesn't work for people.
No. I mean, Jesus even said to his disciples, by this they will know that you're my disciples, your love for one another. And that love should exist beyond just the body of Christ, but to the creation as a whole,
So declaring that it doesn't exist doesn't change reality.
Yeah, exactly.
We could call it by another name. It's still the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm so sad when I hear these kind of events, for it really discredits the church in the eyes of so many.
Yeah. It takes just one bad apple to taint the batch or the barrel or whatever that saying is. Yeah. Okay. The next couple of articles are pretty similar and things that we've talked about before. 3 in 4 Americans feel that mental health takes a backseat to physical health, confronting our mental health crisis, and then untreated mental health issues too often lead to violent crimes. So, just there's a recognition on, as a whole, because all of those come from, like ABC in New York, and a recognition that like there's the mental health crisis and the support for mental health resources is just not where it needs to be at this point. But what about this one where it talks about untreated mental health issues too often lead to violent crime?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, let me share with you a discussion I had with a very mature, high-functioning man, about 50 years old recently, pastor in a local church, and he described how demand after demand after demand was coming up on him, and unexpected pressures on him, all good things, but he said, I had a junior high moment. And what he meant by that was, it's like one more thing came that I needed to respond to, and I just was irrationally angry. Now, that's a low intensity of the same phenomenon.
Sure.
When we're not able to cope with all the demands placed on us, when we don't have the resource to cope with that, we regress to earlier ways of coping. And for some, when they're not able to cope with life, their early ways, they have kind of a primitive, violent acting out.
Yeah.
That if they had additional resources and options available to them, that they may be able to self-regulate so much more effectively.
Yeah.
So I hear them talking about just in violent crime, but I'd like to draw our attention. That's really the case for all of us.
Sure.
And that when we are overwhelmed and the demands seem to exceed our resources, we often act in ways that we regret.
Do you think that's what we were seeing in the pandemic then?
I think we saw a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw the results of a lot of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good reminder. Yeah. A good reminder for all of us of, dealing with stress in a healthy way and then learning how to cope in a healthy way as we navigate this very difficult world that we live in.
One of the things that's so hard for us in a world of affluence that we live in is we're finite.
Yeah.
We only have so many resources, so many coping abilities, etc. And if we don't have those boundaries in place and manage how we're taking in or what is expected of us, et cetera, we can find ourselves overwhelmed and behaving in ways that we're shocked ourselves at.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that to be a very typical conversation that I return to with clients, is that idea of recognizing that we aren't super people. We have limitations.
Yeah.
And the sooner we acknowledge those limitations and learn how to develop healthy coping strategies or boundaries that help us to thrive in this life, the better off we'll be, because we tend to think that we can do it all, but we can't.
Right.
And the sooner we realize that, the better off it is for everybody around us.
Yeah.
Including ourselves.
And maybe even for our dog.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was a good first episode of Mental Health in the News. Believe it or not, that was only 2 days worth of articles that we went through. So we have a lot of ground to make up with other articles, but we'll get there eventually.
Good.
But good to talk with you today.
Yes, it is, right.
Embracing New Life is a production of New Life Resources, a Christian counseling clinic in Southeast Wisconsin, whose aim and goal since 1976 has been to provide high-quality professional counseling, psychological, and consulting services from within a Christian framework.